They say a mother's love is a bottomless well, but they never tell you that a daughter's greed can be a desert that drinks it dry. My name is Margaret. For 32 years, my identity was stripped away, piece by piece, until I was nothing more than a ladder for my daughter Chloe to climb. I didn't mind it at first. In fact, I wore my sacrifices like a badge of honor. When my husband passed away when Chloe was just a toddler, I didn't look for a second chance at love. I looked for a second job. By day, I was a head nurse, standing on my feet for 12-hour shifts until my ankles swelled to the size of grapefruits. By night, I was a freelance seamstress, squinting under a dim yellow bulb to sew intricate lace on gowns for women who lived in neighborhoods I wasn't allowed to walk through. My fingers are permanently scarred from thousands of needle pricks. My vision is blurred from years of fine stitching. My hands, once soft, are now calloused, trembling with the early onset of tremors brought on by sheer exhaustion. But every cent I earned went into the Chloe Fund. I wanted her to have the Ivy League education, the European summer trips, and the wardrobe that whispered, old money, even though we were living in a cramped two-bedroom apartment above a noisy bakery. I didn't just want her to succeed. I wanted her to belong to a world that had always shut its doors on me. I remember the nights I skipped dinner, telling her I had eaten at the hospital, just so she could have the organic ingredients she insisted were necessary for her skin. I remember selling my mother's engagement ring, the only thing I had left of my heritage, just to pay for Chloe's debutante ball dress. I was her silent architect. I built the pedestal she stood on, never realizing that from that height, she would eventually look down on me with nothing but disgust. Everything changed when Chloe met Julian. Julian didn't just have money. He had an aura of untouchable superiority. His family, the Whitmores, were the kind of people who had wings of hospitals named against them. When Chloe started dating him, she didn't just change her circle, she changed her history. It started with small quote, corrections. Mom, she said one evening, looking at my modest kitchen with a sneer. If Julian's mother asks, you didn't work as a nurse, tell her you were a private healthcare consultant. And for heaven's sake, don't mention the sewing. It's so blue collar. I felt a pang in my chest, but I swallowed it. I thought it was just the insecurity of a young girl trying to fit in. I loved her, so I lied for her. I became a consultant. I hid my sewing machine in the closet whenever his friends visited. I became a ghost in my own home, hiding the evidence of the hard work that had put the designer pearls around her neck. But as the wedding approached, a $1 million affair at a private estate in the Hamptons, the corrections turned into cruelties. Chloe became obsessed with the aesthetic of her new life. She hired a high-end PR firm to write a family bio for the wedding program. In it, I wasn't Margaret, the woman who worked double shifts to buy her first violin. I was Margaret Vance Miller, a widowed socialite who had retired to a private life of quiet philanthropy. I was paying for 80% of this wedding. I had used the $4 million inheritance my own father had left me, a fund I had kept secret and grown through careful investments for decades, to fund her dream. She knew the money was there. She called it our golden ticket. But as the big day grew closer, I realized she wanted the ticket. But she didn't want the person who handed it to her. The breaking point should have been the dress fitting. I had spent 3 months secretly hand-beating a veil for her, a masterpiece of silk and pearls that I had worked on until my eyes bled. When I brought it to the bridal boutique, Chloe was surrounded by her bridesmaids, girls with names like Tiffany and Sloane, who had never seen a day of work in their lives. Oh, look, Chloe said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness as I walked in. My mother brought her craft project. I smiled, holding up the veil. Chloe, it's finished. Every pearl is hand-stitched. It's my wedding gift to you, the bridesmaids giggled. Chloe didn't even touch it. She looked at my hands, my red, swollen nurse's hands with the needle scars, and her face twisted in a grimace. Mom, look at your cuticles, she whispered, pulling me aside. And that dress you're wearing, it's so dated. Julian's mother is wearing Chanel. If you stand next to her, everyone will see the difference. You look tired. You look like you've been scrubbing floors. I look like I've been working for 30 years to pay for this boutique, Chloe, I said, my voice trembling. And I'm grateful. Really, she snapped. But this wedding is being featured in a luxury magazine. It's about a look. Your work-worn vibe just doesn't fit the brand I'm building. Maybe you could just stay in the background? You don't have to be in the official photos. We can say you have migraines. People will understand. I left the boutique in tears, the veil I had poured my soul into sitting in a heap on the floor. I told myself it was just wedding stress. I told myself she didn't mean it. I was a mother. I was built to forgive. The day of the wedding was a beautiful, sun-drenched Saturday in June. The Whitmore estate was a sea of white roses and expensive champagne. I had spent the morning in my hotel room, doing my own hair and makeup, trying to look like the socialite Chloe wanted me to be. I put on a modest but elegant silk suit, pinned my mother's remaining brooch to my lapel, and took the car to the venue. I walked toward the bridal suite, my heart full of a strange mix of pride and dread. I wanted to see my daughter. I wanted to tell her she was beautiful. I wanted to give her the final part of her gift, the legal documents, transferring the remainder of the $4 million trust to her name. But I never made it to the door. I was intercepted by a tall, cold woman in a black headset, the wedding planner. Genevieve, I'm sorry, ma'am, she said, checking her tablet. Deliveries are at the side gate. I'm the mother of the bride, I said, straightening my jacket. I'm here to see Chloe. Genevieve's expression shifted from professional to pitying. Ah, yes, Margaret. I have a note here from the bride. She was very concerned about your health, ma'am. She said your chronic exhaustion had taken a turn for the worse, and that you had decided to watch the ceremony from the hotel via a private link. She was quite insistent that you not be stressed by the crowds today. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. What? I'm fine. I'm right here. Move aside. I pushed past her and burst into the suite. Chloe was there, a vision in white, looking like the princess I had dreamed she would be. But when she saw me, there was no love in her eyes. Only panic. Mom, why are you here? She hissed, rushing over and grabbing my arms, steering me toward a private corner. I told Genevieve to tell you to stay back. Chloe, what is this? Chronic exhaustion? You're telling people I'm too sick to attend my only daughter's wedding? The wedding I paid for? Mom, please. Look at the room, she whispered harshly, gesturing to Julian's mother and her elite friends, sipping mimosas. They are literal royalty. Julian's father is a billionaire. If you walk out there with your limp and your shaking hands and your nurse energy, you'll ruin everything. I've told them you're a recluse. I've told them you're delicate and sophisticated and unwell. If you show up looking like a tired old woman who spent her life in a hospital ward, the lie is over. Julian will think I'm a fraud. But you are the daughter of a nurse, Chloe, I whispered, my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. That is the truth of you. My hard work is what made you. Why is that something to be ashamed of? Because in this world, hard work is for the servants, Mom, she snapped. Her face was beautiful, but her soul was unrecognizable. I finally have a chance to be someone, to never have to worry about money or shifts or calloused hands. If you love me, you'll leave. Right now. Go back to the hotel. I'll send you some cake tonight. Please, don't ruin my aesthetic. Don't ruin my day. I looked at my daughter. I looked at the girls she had chosen to be her sisters for the day. Girls who didn't know a single thing about her real life. I looked at the luxury she had bought with my sweat and my blood. She wasn't asking me to leave a party. She was asking me to disappear from her life so she could pretend I never existed. She wanted the dream fund, but she wanted the dream mother to go along with it, and I wasn't pretty or polished enough for the role. Is that your final word, Chloe? I asked. My voice was no longer trembling. It was dead. Yes, she said, checking her watch. The ceremony starts in 20 minutes. Please, the car is still downstairs. Just tell them you felt a spell coming on. I'll call you after the honeymoon. She turned away from me to admire her reflection in the mirror, dismissing me as if I were a servant who had finished her task. I stood there for a long moment. In my pocket was the envelope containing the $4 million inheritance transfer. I felt the weight of it. I thought about the 30 years of double shifts. I thought about the dinners I missed. I thought about the scars on my fingers. You're right, Chloe, I said quietly. It is your day, and you should have exactly the life you've chosen. I walked out of the suite. I walked past the champagne towers, past the white roses, and past the guests in their Chanel and Dior. I didn't cry. The time for crying was over. I got into the car. Back to the hotel, ma'am? The driver asked. No, I said, my voice as cold as the Atlantic. Take me to 42nd Street. I have an appointment with a lawyer and a board of directors at the Children's Hospital. As the sounds of the wedding march began to play in the distance, celebrating the union of the elite, I opened my phone and dialed my accountant. Arthur? It's Margaret. That trust fund for Chloe? The one we were supposed to transfer today? Cancel it. All of it. I want to set up a legacy, but not for her. I want to donate every single cent to the Nursing Scholarship Fund. And I want it done before the sun sets. Chloe wanted a story. She wanted an aesthetic of wealth and prestige. She was about to find out that a pedestal built on lies has a very long way to drop. And the best part? She was currently on her way to a honeymoon in the Maldives that her credit cards backed by my accounts, wouldn't be able to pay for by the time she landed. As the car pulled away from the Whitmore estate, the silence inside the vehicle was heavy, but for the first time in 3 years, it didn't feel suffocating. I looked out the window at the blurred green of the Hamptons. My heart, which had been breaking for the last hour, was now turning into something else, something made of steel. I arrived at the law firm of Sterling and Associates in Midtown Manhattan. My lawyer, Simon, was waiting for me. He looked at my formal suit, then at my face. He didn't ask why I wasn't at the wedding. He had seen enough family betrayals in his 30-year career to recognize the look of a mother who had finally reached her limit. Margaret, he said, pulling out a chair. Are you sure about this? This is $4 million. It was her future. No, Simon, I said, my voice as steady as the heartbeat of a patient in surgery. It was the weapon she used to kill my spirit. I am not destroying her future. I am simply removing the stolen foundation she built it on. If she is as elite and sophisticated as she told her new in-laws, she will find a way to survive without the nurse's dirty money. You might wonder why I worked so hard if I had money. The truth is, my father had left me a $4 million inheritance, but it was locked in a conservative trust. I made a vow never to touch it until Chloe's wedding day. I wanted her to learn the value of a dollar through my sweat, and I wanted that money to be her ultimate security. So I lived on my nurse's salary by choice, saving the golden ticket for her grand finale. For the next 4 hours, we worked. I didn't just donate the money. I structured it. I created the Margaret Miller Nursing Excellence Trust. It was designed to provide full-ride scholarships to single mothers who were struggling to get through nursing school, women like I used to be. But I didn't stop there. Chloe's wedding, her dress, the catering, and the 6-star honeymoon to the Maldives had all been booked using credit cards that were technically sub-accounts of my primary wealth management fund. She had power of attorney for emergencies, which she had abused to fund her extravagant lifestyle. Simon, I said, looking at the clock. The ceremony should be ending right about now. They'll be heading to the reception. I want all the sub-accounts frozen. Not tomorrow. Not tonight. Now. Margaret, if I do that, the honeymoon flights, the hotel deposits, even the vendor payments that haven't cleared yet, they will all bounce, Simon warned. I know, I replied. She wanted me to stay in the shadows because I didn't fit the brand. Let's see how the brand holds up when the bank account matches the reclusive socialite mother she invented. While I was sitting in a quiet diner, eating a simple sandwich for the first time in days without worrying about Chloe's organic standards, my daughter was boarding a private jet to the Maldives. She didn't know that the world she had carefully curated was already dissolving. The first crack in her new life appeared at the airport's VIP lounge. Julian, with his arrogant smile and expensive watch, handed over the black card for a luxury vintage bottle of wine they wanted to take on the flight. Declined. He tried again. Declined. He laughed it off, assuming it was a bank error. He used his own card, the one his father gave him, only to realize it had a much smaller limit than he pretended. They eventually boarded the flight, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The real explosion happened 48 hours later. Chloe and Julian arrived at the Soneva Johnny Resort, the kind of place where villas cost $5,000 a night. They were greeted with cold towels and tropical drinks. But when it came time to settle the incidentals and confirm the 10-day stay, the resort manager's face went from welcoming to professional concern. I'm terribly sorry, Mrs. Whitmore, the manager said, his voice soft but loud enough for the other guests to hear. The primary card on file has been flagged as closed by owner, and the secondary wire transfer for the deposit was retracted by the issuing bank. Chloe, wearing a silk cover-up that cost more than my first car, felt her face heat up. That's impossible. Check it again. My mother she's very wealthy. It's probably just a security block. We tried, ma'am. The bank's note says, unauthorized access to funds. Account liquidated for charitable donation. Julian turned to her, his brow furrowing. Chloe? What the hell is he talking about? Liquidated? I thought you said your mother's trust was handled by a private firm that you managed? It is. I mean, it was. Chloe stammered, her heart racing. She stepped away to call me. She called 10 times. 20 times. I didn't answer. I was busy. I was at the hospital, not as a nurse but as a benefactor, watching the first group of young mothers receive their scholarship letters. By the third day of their honeymoon, the elite couple was being asked to leave the resort. Julian's family, the billionaire Whitmores, were actually quite conservative with their cash. Julian's father had told him that if he married a wealthy girl like Chloe, he would have to stand on his own feet. Julian had lied to his father about Chloe's wealth, and Chloe had lied to Julian about her socialite mother. They were two ghosts married to each other's illusions. When they couldn't pay the bill, Julian's father had to be called. The shame was public. The Whitmores had to wire money to save their son from being detained in a foreign country for fraud. When they finally flew back, not in a private jet, but in coach, the silence between them was like a poison. They arrived back at their luxury apartment in New York, only to find a legal notice pinned to the door. The apartment was leased in my name. I had terminated the lease. Chloe's designer bags, her shoes, her hand-beaded veil, everything she had used to build her aesthetic, were packed into cardboard boxes and sitting in a storage unit. I was waiting for them at a small coffee shop across the street. I wasn't wearing a silk suit. I was wearing my old nursing scrubs. I had gone back to volunteer for a shift, just to remind myself of who I was. Chloe saw me and marched across the street, her face red with a fury I had never seen. Julian followed her, looking like a man who had just realized he had married a commoner. How could you do this? Chloe screamed, oblivious to the people staring at her. You ruined my honeymoon. You embarrassed me in front of Julian's father. They think I'm a liar. They think I'm poor. But you are poor, Chloe, I said, taking a calm sip of my coffee. Without my hands, without my work, and without my money, you have nothing. You spent 30 years pretending my sacrifices were your birthright. You told the world I was an eyesore. So, I did what any eyesore does. I removed myself from the picture. You donated the money? To a hospital? My money? She shrieked. It was never your money, Chloe. It was my life. And I decided that my life was better spent helping women who actually respect the work it takes to survive, rather than a girl who is ashamed of the woman who gave her everything. Julian looked at Chloe, then at me. Is it true? You were a nurse, not a consultant? I was a head nurse for 32 years, Julian, I said, showing him my calloused palms. I also sewed that dress your wife is wearing. I worked double shifts so she could buy those pearls. If that's not elite enough for your family, then perhaps you should have looked at her heart instead of her bank account. Julian didn't say anything. He just turned and walked away. He didn't even look back at Chloe. His family's brand couldn't handle a scandal like this. He was a social climber, and Chloe was the ladder that just snapped. Chloe sat down across from me, her expensive makeup running down her face. She looked like the little girl who used to cry when she dropped her ice cream, but I didn't feel the urge to pick it up for her this time. What am I supposed to do now? She whispered. Julian's father is going to make him annul the marriage. I have no house. I have no money. I have nothing. You have exactly what you gave me on your wedding day, Chloe, I said, standing up. You have your aesthetic. You have your pride. You have your story. Now, go see if you can pay your rent with it. I walked away. I didn't look back, but the revenge wasn't over. Not yet. See, the donation I made was public. I made sure the local news covered the generous donation from the mother of socialite Chloe Miller. The story was picked up by the very luxury magazine Chloe wanted to be featured in, but they didn't write about her royal wedding. They wrote about the sacrifice of a nurse and the ungrateful daughter who tried to hide her. The social circles of New York are small. Within a week, Chloe was a pariah. No one wanted to be seen with the girl who kicked her own mother out of her wedding for looking poor. I moved into a small house by the beach. It's quiet. I have my sewing machine. I have my books, and for the first time in my life, I don't have to hide my hands. The months following the wedding that never was were the quietest of my life. I had moved away from the neon lights and the judgment of Manhattan to a small, salt-aired cottage on the coast of Maine. Here, the people didn't care about old money or refined aesthetics. They cared if your wood was stacked for the winter and if you had a hot pot of soup for a neighbor in need. I spent my days volunteering at a local clinic and my evenings by the fireplace, sewing quilts for the local orphanage. My hands still trembled occasionally, and my joints still ached, but for the first time, I didn't feel the need to hide them. These hands had built a legacy that was now funding the dreams of 52 young nurses across the country. I was no longer an eyesore. I was a founder, but a mother's shadow is long, and eventually, the past always finds its way to the door. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 6 months after I had liquidated the trust. I was in my garden, my knees in the dirt, tending to my hydrangeas, when a taxi pulled up to the gate. Out stepped a woman who looked like a ghost of the girl I once knew. Chloe was no longer wearing Vera Wang. She was wearing a cheap, wrinkled trench coat and shoes that had seen better days. Her hair, once perfectly coiffed by stylists, was pulled back in a messy, greasy knot. She looked at my small cottage with a mix of desperation and the lingering remnants of her old arrogance. "So this is where you've been hiding," she said, her voice thin and raspy. I didn't stand up immediately. I finished pruning the branch I was working on, then slowly rose, dusting the soil off my apron. "I'm not hiding, Chloe. I'm living. There's a difference." I invited her inside. The house smelled of lavender and fresh bread, scents she used to call common. She sat at my wooden kitchen table, looking at the scarred surface as if it were a foreign object. "Julian left me, Mom," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears that no longer moved me. "The annulment went through last month. His father made sure I got nothing. Not even the engagement ring. They claimed I entered the marriage under false pretenses. They called me a social climber and a fraud in the legal papers. Were they wrong?" I asked softly, setting a cup of tea in front of her. She flinched. "I did it for us, Mom. I wanted us to be part of that world. If I had told them the truth, that we were just a nurse and a daughter from a walk-up apartment, they never would have looked at me. I was trying to give us a better life." "No, Chloe," I corrected her, my voice firm. "You were trying to give yourself a life that required you to be ashamed of me. You didn't want us in that world. You wanted a version of you that didn't have a mother with calloused hands. You wanted the fruit, but you hated the roots. And a tree without roots cannot stand the wind." Chloe broke down then, sobbing into her hands that were now becoming rough and dry, just like mine. "I'm broke, Mom. I've been staying in a cramped studio with 3 other girls. I'm working as a waitress at a diner where people treat me like I'm invisible. I can't pay my bills. I thought maybe you'd had your fun. Maybe you'd realized that donating all that money was a mistake. You still have the house, right? You still have the savings?" I looked at her, and for a moment, I saw the little girl I used to tuck into bed. But then I remembered the wedding planner's cold words. She said, "You don't fit the brand." "The money is gone, Chloe," I said. "Every cent of it is tied up in the scholarship trust. It is currently paying for the tuition of women who are working 16-hour shifts, just like I did. It is helping daughters who actually love their mothers enough to stand beside them, no matter what they're wearing." "But I'm your daughter," she shrieked, the entitlement returning for a fleeting second. "You'd rather help strangers than your own blood?" "I helped my blood for 30 years, I replied. "I gave you my youth, my health, and my dreams. I gave you a $4 million head start. You didn't want the money. You wanted the aesthetic of being better than me. Well, now you have the chance to actually be someone. From the bottom. Just like I did." I reached into my kitchen drawer and pulled out a small, worn envelope. Chloe's eyes lit up with greed, thinking it was a check. But when she opened it, her face fell. It was a set of brochures for the local community college and a job listing for a nursing assistant position at the clinic where I volunteered. "If you want my help, Chloe, this is it," I said. "I won't give you a cent to buy another designer bag or a ticket to a gala. But if you are willing to put on a pair of scrubs, scrub floors, and learn what it actually means to care for another human being, then I will pay for your books. I will give you a room in this house. But you will work. You will earn your own brand. Chloe looked at the brochures, then at me, then at her own trembling hands. The silence lasted for what felt like an hour. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor. You're serious? She asked. You want me to be a nurse? After everything? I want you to be a human being, Chloe. Being a nurse is just one way to get there. It teaches you that every person, no matter how poor they look, has a story, a soul, and a value that no luxury brand can ever replicate. Chloe didn't say yes that day. She left, angry and bitter, claiming I was punishing her. But 3 weeks later, she showed up at my door with a small bag of her belongings. She didn't say anything. She just picked up a broom and started sweeping the porch. She's currently in her second semester. Her hands are starting to get those same needle pricks and soap burns mine used to have. She's tired. She's humbled. And for the first time in her life, when she looks at me, she doesn't see an eyesore. She sees a woman. Success is not a costume you put on to impress the elite. It is a foundation you build with the bricks of your own hard work. If you are ashamed of the hands that fed you, the clothes that covered you, and the sacrifices that made you, then you are not high society. You are simply a hollow shell. Never kick the ladder that helped you climb, because the world is round, and you will eventually have to come back down. I often sit on my porch now, watching Chloe study her anatomy books under the evening light. She's learning the hard way that a mother's love is a gift, not a debt. But it makes me wonder about all of you out there watching this. If your child treated you like an embarrassment in front of their wealthy friends, would you have the heart to give them a second chance like I did? Or would you let them stay in the world they chose until they completely broke? And to the children watching, have you thanked your parents for the calloused hands that built your life today? Tell me your story in the comments.